Welcome back. Hope you're doing well. Andy here from Drive Steady, and in this video I'm reviewing a Ford Bronco. So listen up, the Bronco name has a lot of weight in the industry and is one of the most hyped up cars in recent history. This one I have today is the top of the line Wild Track trim for the 2022 model year. That is of course until the Raptor comes out, but now that these things are showing up in dealers and owners' hands, we're gonna find out what it's all about. So stay tuned for this review of the Ford Bronco Wild Track. Man, just look at the face on this thing. It looks so good and so aggressive. Really mean looking. But putting aside the looks for a second, I want to talk about the 2022 model year for the Bronco. So you've got 6 trim levels, all of which are available in 2- and 4-door configurations. So you start out with the base trim level starting at just under $30,000, and you go all the way up to the Wild Track, which starts just a hair under $50,000, and of course you can add options to all of those trim levels. But this one I've got here is actually a really good one as far as coolness and just overall spec. It's the Wild Track, the top of the line with the Sasquatch package and this really cool looking Area 51 bluish grayish paint. Depending on what type of lighting you get, when you see this color in photos, it doesn't do it justice. When you see it in person, it really pops on the new Bronco. And speaking of popping, now let's talk about the looks of the Bronco. I remember watching the debut, and once things were uncovered, the only word I can use to describe it was wow, because they actually pulled it off. And they being Ford, of course, and by pulling it off, meaning they bought back a retro name with retro styling with so much hype and managed to make it look good. Now the only thing that I think is missing, and maybe the better way to put it is to make it look even better than it actually does, is a brush guard. Maybe one of those things that you see in the G63, the Mercedes, where it's covering the lower portion of the bumper. But with or without that, this thing looks absolutely gnarly and one of the cooler looking cars available for sale today. So speaking of cool, let's keep it going. You've got these trail ties on the hood, which look really cool when you look at them, and they're actually very functional. They have a capacity of 150 pounds, so if you're going off-roading, Ford says you could hang like a canoe or something off of them. So if you wanted to do that, that's what you would use. Now, the other probably coolest and biggest selling point about the Bronco is the fact that it's somewhat of a convertible SUV. So you can see here that this one has the soft top, but you can also get a hard top Bronco as well. Now keep in mind there was a shortage of hard tops with the Bronco when they first came out, but now I think Ford is coming to their own, or obviously it's because of a COVID restriction. So these things are becoming more and more available, and dealers are asking owners to come back so they can get their hard tops for their Bronco. But anyway, now about the roof and opening it, the owner told me that the first time he tried it, it took him about 45 minutes to do it. But as he's gotten used to lowering the roof, it takes about 5 to 10 minutes now, so it's not that complicated. And another cool factor is you can take off all of the doors. So the Bronco does have frameless doors, which make them a little bit lighter. I believe each door on the Bronco weighs about 40 pounds or so. But because this is a 4-door Bronco, you can store all of your doors inside the cabin. So the Ford gives you these carrying cases for your doors. You can put them inside your trunk. You don't have to leave them behind if you're going off-roading or if you're in a pinch. So that's always a conveniency when you've got a feature like taking off your doors. All right, so now let's talk about the engine inside of this Wildtrak Bronco. And this one is a 2.7 liter turbocharged 6-cylinder, making 315 horsepower and 410 pounds-feet of torque. And it's made it to a 10-speed automatic, and it's obviously putting power down to all 4 wheels. Now, if you wanted to get this bigger power motor, you have to get the 10-speed automatic. You cannot get it in a manual. But if you didn't want the manual, you have to bump down to a 2.3 liter 4-cylinder, still making a healthy 275 horsepower and 315 pounds-feet of torque. So it's just a little give and take. I've never driven the manual, but I can tell you that this 10-speed automatic is really good, and this engine is pretty punchy, as I'll talk about during the driving portion of the review. Now, I'll talk about some of the suspension bits later on in the video, but this does have a Advanced Tech solid rear axle and a independent front differential. Now, if you bump up to some of the higher trim levels, you can get electronic locking front and rear differentials. Now, another cool thing about the all-wheel drive system, there's different modes. So you can have it in 2-wheel drive, you can have it in 4-wheel low, 4-wheel high, or you can even put it in 4-wheel automatic and let the computer of the all-wheel drive system do the thinking on its own. So enough of that. This isn't really a performance car, but it is the higher trim level with a bigger engine. So let's go around back and listen to what it sounds like. All right, so now we made it to the rear end of the Bronco. So some details and some inconveniences that I've also noticed about the top and the swing open style tailgate. Now, the clever and interesting design here is the placement of the backup camera. It's actually mounted right here on this thing that's protruding out, holding your spare tire. Now, the spare tire hang back here is actually really cool looking, and it's very clever from Ford to be able to integrate a backup camera there. Now, the swing open style tailgate trunk. Now, you open this thing this way, and it is strut operated, so there isn't a lot of necessary effort to open it. Now, one thing that I noticed that's somewhat inconvenient, or I'm not sure if you want to call it an inconvenience, it's just something I noticed. So if you're in a rush and you pop this thing open real fast, that strut is almost kind of slow to operate and to catch up to you. So when you let your arm go off of the handle, the strut kind of swings back and forth, or the door kind of swings back and forth, and it's almost like the strut is catching up to the position where it needs to be in. Now, speaking of position, this thing does have a second position, and it is actually very convenient because it opens up more than a 90-degree angle, which gives you this infinite maneuverability in front of your trunk to put in and take out larger items. Now, I'm going to come over to this side and explain something I noticed about this top. So before doing that though, this opening here and the overall trunk space is fantastic. You can fold down the rear seats, you have ties in here, so there isn't any concern for somebody who wants to use this thing on a day-to-day basis. When you're off-roading, I can see you throwing a whole bunch of stuff in here without having any concerns. Now, one thing that somewhat is an inconvenience, at least for me, is what if I've got something bigger than this height? What do I do? So because this is the soft top, there are 2 latches here, and I find this somewhat of an inconvenience, but of course this is a byproduct of being able to have the convertible top. Now, so there are these 2 latches here, you push on them and you get this type of motion with the top, and there's this pop rod style hood opening type of thing, and this is how your soft top is held up, so you have a little bit more space to throw your things in here. And obviously when you're done, you just fold it closed like this and you drop the top and it's shut. So beyond just some of these inconveniences with that strut and it kind of swinging open and things like that, it makes it look a little funny. And if you've got things that are high in height and you need to do this, it's kind of these additional steps for you. But beyond those minor nitpicking things, the trunk space is great. The swing open style tailgate is also pretty good. and you've got a lot of conveniences back here and a lot of functional use for a car that's a lot of people are just going to use on a day-to-day basis. So now let me go around to the side and talk about the suspension bits and of course the Sasquatch package. Alright guys, now let's talk about the suspension, the wheels, and the big fat tires on this Bronco. So let's start off with the modes. So this thing has something called GOAT modes, and there's several of them. There's normal, sport, sand, slippery, eco. I believe there's up to 7 modes, and this car is all about the acronyms as far as the suspension goes. So GOAT is goes over all terrain. There's also a Haas suspension, which stands for high performance off-road stability suspension. Now Ford is playing some games with the letters in their acronyms, but those are a couple highlights. Now another highlight, and probably the most popular thing on the Bronco as far as the wheels, the tires, and the suspension, is the Sasquatch package. Now the Sasquatch package does have some extra functional benefits, like it gives you an additional 11.5 inches of ground clearance, and it has a 43.2 degree approach angle, but the tires are 35 inches. Now, beyond just all the functional benefits you get with the Sasquatch package, there is this level of coolness and visual enhancement that it offers over a car without the Sasquatch package. With this thing, with the big tires and these blacked out 17-inch wheels, you get a really menacing and aggressive look. All right, so now the interior of the Bronco, and let's just jump right into it, talking about some of the characteristics, how it feels in here, some of the materials, things like that. So first things first, I'm 5'10", 5'11", and because this does have the Sasquatch package, it does elevate the height of the Bronco. So this grab handle here, I felt it was necessary in order for me to kind of hop into the car. It's either this or the steering wheel, and don't grab the steering wheel, just grab this grab handle. That's what it's there for. Now, once you're in the seat, you've got this really nice driving position. You look out over on top of the hood, and I'll talk more about that during the driving portion of the review, but it's a really nice high driving position, and if you're a person who likes that, you're gonna like it in here as well. Now the seat. So this seat is a very comfortable seat, actually. It's not aggressive whatsoever. It doesn't have bolstering or any of that stuff to hold you in, but it is very comfortable. The leather is actually really soft and of a nice quality. Now, speaking of the leather, in this higher Wild Track trim, you have 2 options. You either get the leather option like this one, which costs about $2,000, or you get this different cloth type material along with some additional vinyl broken into it. Now, speaking of the materials, this is a very utilitarian, very outdoorsy, very rough and ruggedy type interior. So what I mean by that is there's a lot of plastic in here, a lot of plastic, a lot of rubber, not a lot of fine materials, no like aluminum, no metals, no leathers, besides if you option them in, of course, like the seat. But beyond just the steering wheel and stuff, everything else is plastic, and some people are going to be turned off by that. So if you're coming in here expecting like this really somewhat high quality type of interior, you're not going to get it here, because this is very focus driven on off-roading and the functionality of all of these plastics and rubberized materials for that type of environment. Is it horrible like 10, 20 years ago Chevrolet type of interior quality? No, it's not. It's well put together. It looks pretty good, but just have your expectations checked if you're looking for something this is not even like, some economy cars have better materials than this car, but that's just because, like I said, this is focused on off-roading and not much else, to be honest with you. But on a day-to-day basis, you're probably going to be fine. Anyways, it is what it is. And then coming over into the center section of the car, you have 6 auxiliary switches that are pre-wired, giving you the ability to put on some LED light bars or some tow hitches, motorized tow hitches, things like that. So that's always nice. And then you've got these rugged looking rubber buttons here that allow you to lock your differentials and turn your traction control and things like that on and off. More off-roading stuff right up here for you. And then finally, you've got the info infotainment screen. Now this has the standard 8-inch infotainment screen, which is very good. It's a touch screen, it's crisp, it's clear, it's extremely easy to use. The software is very, very easy to use, but there is an additional option of a 12-inch screen. Now I don't have any experience with a 12-inch screen, but that is going to offer a little bit more enhanced visual dynamics. You got a bigger screen, it's easier to see. Some people just like the bigger screen, it makes the interior look a little bit cooler. But there's nothing wrong with this 8-inch screen. It has all the functionality that you need, that you're going to use on a day-to-day basis. So if you want to skip the 12-inch screen, no problem. I didn't find any issues with this infotainment software. Now, speaking of the software, a couple additional things. This does have Apple CarPlay and Android Auto. And one really cool thing about the software, or these screens, both in the LCD gauge cluster and in the center section, is the splash screen that you get when you hop in. It's kind of like these rocks pebbling up and leading up to a Bronco symbol. And what it reminded me a lot of was the Terminator T1000, or I don't remember which model it was, but the liquid lava metal kind of gathering together and forming the bad guy Terminator in Terminator 2, which is probably the best Terminator. But anyway, I just kind of drew that comparison between that and the Terminator movie. And then finally, this thing does have a cool thing called trail maps, and it's available both online or offline, so you can download them if you're going out and about and you don't really have signal out there. You have these interesting trail maps that you can use to guide yourself around, and hopefully you don't get lost. But nonetheless, that's basically the front seat. Now let's go to the back and talk about what's going on over there. So now I'm in the back seat, and sitting behind myself, I've got plenty of leg room, I've got plenty of headroom, no concerns as far as comfort or seating position in the back seat of the Bronco. So as far as space goes, 2 people, obviously more than enough room. 3rd person can probably squeeze in here. 3 adults can squeeze in here, not for a long period of time. 3 children, more than adequate. Now I do have a armrest here with 2 cup holders, so nice conveniency option there. And you've got charging capabilities back here, which is a must for all back seats. I don't care what type of car you're making in 2022, you have to have charging capabilities, and the Bronco's got you covered. So you have a Type C outlet and a Type A outlet, and you've also got a traditional household style plug-in 110 volt outlet as well. So this is actually very convenient if you've got a laptop you want to plug in here, or let's say you just have your actual phone charging head unit. You can plug that in and get all the juice that you need. Always good to have options as far as charging goes, especially if you want to put multiple people back here. So that's basically the interior. The way I can put it to you is that it's good. It's not the selling point of this car. It's not as cool as the exterior. It's not as cool as the Sasquatch and the tires and things like that. It's good. It's definitely purpose-built for off-road. You've got the rubberized materials, the high plastics, and all this stuff. It's made for durability. So don't come in here expecting a whole bunch of luxury. But the flip side of that, talking about durability, if you're planning on holding this thing for 10, 15, 20 years, these durable plastics are going to last much longer than some of the expensive material that you see in other cars. Beyond that, now let's go to the driving portion of the review and see what this thing feels like behind the wheel. Alright, so now the driving portion of the Bronco review, and as always, let me take the key out. And nothing special, it just says Bronco on there, nothing very extraordinary, but nonetheless, it is just a regular Bronco. So now, as far as the price goes and the trim levels, this is the Wild Track, just a hair under $50,000. This does have the leather seat, so it's about $51,000, $52,000, including all the destination and all those fees and such. You can go crazy and get this up to the $55,000 and $60,000 range for sure. So now let's go ahead and put this thing in drive. I've already got the engine running, and let's go for a spin, shall we? So the first thing is, when you're sitting in this Bronco, it gives you this really cool vibe. I got this vibe when I sat in my Shelby GT350, or sit in my Shelby GT350 with the hood lines, and I can see those trail lines that you can attach like canoes and stuff to, as I mentioned earlier on, and it gives you this unique experience, this unique vibe when you're driving it. So I'm not gonna go crazy with this car as far as speed and all this acceleration and handling and such, and I'm not gonna pretend to be a off-roading guru or anything like that, because I'm the furthest away from an off-roader, and this is also the furthest thing away from a sports car. So let's just give it a quick pull in, let's put it in sport mode. Wake up engine. All right, sport mode. It's shifting into 4x4 mode automatically. I'll wait for it to do that, and then I'm just gonna go for it. So let's see how this thing goes. Floor to the floor. It moves. I mean, depending on what your expectation is, it's definitely not fast. It doesn't really even give you that shove or anything like that, so it's not a fast truck, that's for sure. Obviously that's what the Raptor's for. So that's pretty much it. All I can say as far as the speed goes, it's adequate. You can get more than enough speed for day-to-day driving. You're not really going to have a lot of issues passing on the highway or driving on a day-to-day basis. So no concerns as far as the speed goes in the 6-cylinder. And then beyond that, the transmission is also very, very good. No issues here. I do have the ability to shift it manually, but no paddle shifters on the transmission. So it is something you're going to have to use the shift stock down here on the floor. No, well, not on the floor, in the center console. Now, a couple other things that I noticed in here as far as the driving dynamics. The suspension is not the softest or the cushioniest. It is, I'm not going to say stiff, but you do get some of the bumps coming into the road. I can see that my camera shakes as I'm driving over the some of the uneven pavements here, and the image stabilization is doing its best to keep the image stable, but my camera is definitely moving. I can see it. So the suspension is okay. The steering is pretty good. I could easily see this car being daily driven. I wish the suspension was a little well, let me put it to you this way. If you're buying this car to drive it on a day-to-day basis, you're probably going to wish that it had just a slight more cushioning, or some, I don't know, a more comfortable ride, because it's definitely, you're going to feel the road in this car. It's not super cushiony. Now, some of the other things as far as the basically the livability of this car. One thing that's immediately noticeable in the soft top version, I haven't driven any of the other versions, is there's a lot of wind noise that comes into the car. I'm going, what, 37 miles an hour, and I can easily hear everything going, the wind going over, and it's actually pretty loud. And I don't know, it's definitely noticeable. So I'm not sure if that's a soft top thing or if it's a hard top thing, or maybe there's something loose in the soft top, but it definitely makes a lot of noise when you're driving around. You get a lot of the wind noise coming into the car. Overall, what do I think of this car? It's definitely one of the coolest cars that you could buy today. It gets a lot of attention, and the looks are absolutely amazing. The performance, you're not really buying this car for like straight line speed or anything like that, and I certainly cannot comment on any of the off-roading capabilities. I'm just talking about it on like a day-to-day basis, more of a casual, maybe even a toy type of car. And this is definitely an experience car. It's exactly that. It's a toy car. It's the experience part of it is you sit up high, you got this cool looking car, and it makes you feel a certain way. And on top of that, the additional experience of having the roof down and doing things with this car, adventurous things, going fishing, going to the beach, going up into the mountains. I took this on a little grassy area, and it just felt so cool and unique to be able to do that in this type of car. And that's how I can sum this car up. It's a really good experience car. Oh, and one other thing before I end the video off, I can't believe I forgot about this. The one thing I wish that this car had is a diesel. Even if it was like the same speed, I wish it had a diesel. It would add more to that unique experience with that engine lope and then the unique sound of a diesel. It would make it seem more truckish. That's really the only thing, or obviously a V8, but maybe even the diesel over a V8. So if I had a wish list, that's what I would want for this Bronco. Otherwise, that's all I've got. Thank you for watching this video. Until next time, drive steady.